Bigfoot is not just big in stature. For some, it's also big business. There's long been a thriving economy built around the legend. So when we heard an account of a man who said he killed Bigfoot, we had to investigate.
Back in August 2018, a team of researchers trekking through the dense, misty forests of Washington's Olympic Mountains found something that sent chills down their spines. It wasn't just another abandoned campsite or an old hunting cabin, it was human remains. And they belonged to Jacob Gray, a young man who had mysteriously disappeared over a year earlier. But this was only the start of a truly unsettling tale. Bones in the Olympic Mountains. When search teams returned the next day, they found more than just Jacob's bones. Scattered nearby were fragments from 3 other individuals, 3 completely separate people, discovered in the same remote, untouched wilderness. A lost wallet, torn clothing, and an old phone lay among the remains, as if someone, or something, had been watching and waiting. And then there were the arrows. 3 of them, planted upright in the ground like some kind of warning. Investigators recovered data from the phone, hoping for answers. Instead, what they found raised even more terrifying questions. The evidence hinted that Jacob wasn't just lost in the wilderness, he was being stalked, tracked, hunted by something massive, something inhuman. Even the sheriff on the case couldn't ignore the eerie possibility. He suggested the area might not just be a dumping ground for bodies, but a nest. So, what really happened to Jacob Gray? Let's rewind. Jacob was no ordinary hiker. He was a skilled mountaineer, a fearless surfer, and an adventurer at heart. Raised in Santa Cruz, California, he thrived on pushing limits, embracing the wild, and testing himself against nature. But in April 2017, he set out on a journey that would take him deep into the freezing, unforgiving wilderness of the Pacific Northwest, alone. And he was never seen alive again. But was it really the cold that took him? You'll be shocked to find out that it wasn't. Jacob had always been drawn to the wild. It was more than just a passion. It was an obsession. So when he decided to disappear into the depths of the Olympic Mountains, he told no one. No warnings, no plans, just the open road and the unknown ahead, the beginning of the tragedy. On the rainy evening of April 5, 2017, he packed up his gear and set off, undeterred by the heavy downpour. Unlike most travelers, Jacob wasn't just hiking. He was on a bike, pulling a custom-built trailer his dad had modified. This wasn't just any trailer. It was compact, sturdy, and built to withstand the roughest terrains. It carried everything he needed: food, camping gear, and most surprisingly, a composite bow with a set of arrows. Jacob wasn't just an adventurer, he was a survivor. That bow wasn't just for sport, it was for hunting, for food, and possibly for protection. His destination was the Hoh Rainforest, one of the most remote and untouched areas of Olympic National Park. This isn't your average woodland. It's a place where towering ancient trees block out the sky, where thick moss carpets the ground, and where nature thrives completely undisturbed. Nestled in the northwestern tip of Washington, Olympic National Park is like stepping into another world. From rugged coastlines to misty rainforests and even snow-covered peaks, it's a land of extremes. But the most chilling part is that 96% of it is pure, untouched wilderness. Protected since 1976, this park remains as wild as it was centuries ago, a perfect escape for those looking to disappear into nature. Jacob was one of those people. But just 2 days into his journey, something was already wrong. On April 6th, hikers along the Solduke Trail stumbled upon something eerie: Jacob's bike and trailer. It wasn't just abandoned, it had been carefully covered with a waterproof tarp, as if someone had intentionally concealed it. Everything inside was still neatly packed, no sign of a struggle, no footprints leading away. And that was just the beginning. That afternoon, 2 officers arrived at the scene to inspect the abandoned trailer and its contents. It had been 2 days since Jacob Gray had set out into the Olympic Mountains, and already something felt deeply unsettling. Shocking evidence discovered. Inside the trailer, the officers discovered a notebook with his name written inside: Jacob Gray, 22 years old. A young backpacker, a lover of the wilderness, someone who knew how to survive in the wild, yet his gear had been left behind without a single indication of what had happened to him. The scene surrounding the trailer raised even more questions than answers. Just a few feet away, 4 arrows stood perfectly upright, embedded into the damp earth as if placed there deliberately. They weren't scattered, they weren't lost. They were arranged with intent. But why? Even stranger was the condition of Jacob's belongings. His bike and trailer were undamaged. No broken parts, no punctured tires, no sign of a struggle. The waterproof tarp covering his gear was still secured, shielding everything from the rain that had poured down just days earlier. Nothing looked ransacked. Nothing looked tampered with. It was as if he had carefully set everything in place, then walked away without looking back. The trail near the discovery site led into the heart of the Olympic National Park, one of the most untamed wilderness areas in the country. If Jacob had continued in that direction, he would have been heading toward Lynx Ridge, a place where thick forest gave way to towering alpine peaks, where the terrain became more dangerous with every step. The deeper you went, the more you left civilization behind. The moment Jacob was declared missing, authorities wasted no time launching a massive search effort. By the following morning, 30 officers, a team of K-9 search dogs, and countless volunteers descended upon the area. They combed through dense underbrush, scanned the landscape from helicopters, and followed every possible trail where he might have wandered. Jacob's parents arrived soon after. Heartbroken and desperate, they printed out missing person posters and plastered them across the region, at every trailhead, every rest stop, every gas station. They spoke to hikers, campers, park rangers, anyone who might have seen something, anything that could lead them to their son. But there was nothing. Days turned to weeks. Weeks turned to months. The search teams covered miles of forest, rivers, and valleys. But they found no tracks, no torn clothing, no sign of a struggle. Not a single clue as to what had happened to him. Then, a year later, something finally surfaced. Human remains. On August 10, 2018, deep in the Olympic Mountains, a team of researchers was conducting a study on marmots when they came across something unexpected. It was hidden in the thick brush, nestled between the roots of towering trees, a human leg bone. They immediately contacted the Clallam County Sheriff's Office. By the next day, a full team of investigators arrived at the site. As they ventured further into the woods, a putrid stench began to fill the air. A stench that grew stronger the deeper they went. They followed the scent through the dense forest, and soon they found more than just a single leg bone. Scattered across the damp forest floor were more human remains. A pelvis, ribs, pieces of bone that had been exposed to the elements for who knew how long. Shreds of fabric clung to branches, barely recognizable. A wallet, partially buried beneath layers of decomposing leaves. A phone, its screen shattered. And then, just a few miles away, something even more unnerving. A lone, broken wooden post. Beside it, a backpack, still zipped shut, containing a water filter, canned food, and other supplies that should have been enough to sustain someone in the wild. But whoever had left it there never returned to use them. Nearby, the collapsed remains of a tent. Torn, weathered by time, but still intact enough to recognize. And right beside it, 3 arrows were embedded in the earth. Just like the ones found near Jacob's trailer. It was as if he had marked something, as if he had tried to leave a message no one would ever understand. The investigators worked quickly to piece together what they had found. The phone, the wallet, the backpack, it all belonged to Jacob. His family was notified, their worst fears confirmed. Their son was gone. But then came the real shock. According to Sheriff Will, the bones they found didn't all belong to Jacob. Some of them did, yes, but others didn't. Among the remains, the coroner identified bones that had been there much longer. 2 different sets. 2 different people. A 34-year-old hunter named Maxime Jacques, missing since 2010. A 33-year-old hiker, Diane Bonneau, who had vanished in 2012. Maxime had disappeared without a trace while hunting in the same area. Diane had gone missing on a solo hike through the park, never seen again. Their bones were old, far older than Jacob's, bleached by years of exposure. Time had worn them down, but somehow they had all ended up here in this same remote stretch of forest. 3 people, 3 different disappearances, all in the same place. A stalker in the wild. The discovery site wasn't a campsite, not even close. It was 11 miles off the Solduke Trail, deep in the heart of Olympic National Park's unforgiving wilderness. At an elevation of 6,000 feet, this was no place for an unprepared hiker to survive. The terrain was brutal, the temperature shifts extreme, and the landscape so dangerous that even professional climbers would struggle to navigate it. The sheer isolation of the area was staggering, and yet this was where they found Jacob Gray. There were no signs of human activity anywhere nearby. No makeshift fire pits, no discarded food wrappers, no remnants of an old shelter. If someone had been living out here, hunting, stalking, waiting, there would have been something. A hidden camp, a cave, anything. But there was nothing. If a serial killer had been behind these disappearances, they would have to be a ghost. No tracks, no shelter, no way to survive in an environment that would kill the average person in days. And then, there was the way Jacob's belongings had been left behind. A murderer wouldn't just dump a victim's personal items in plain sight. The backpack was zipped shut, still packed with supplies. His wallet was there too, untouched. Cash, credit cards, everything intact. A careful, methodical killer wouldn't have left those things behind. They would have taken the money, destroyed the evidence. But instead, Jacob's things were left there as if he had placed them himself before vanishing into the void. And it wasn't just Jacob. Maxime Jacques had disappeared in 2010, had serious survival skills. He had gone missing while tracking game in this very region, carrying a high-caliber rifle and a machete. He wasn't just another inexperienced hiker. He knew the wilderness. He knew how to survive. And yet, something out here had taken him down. When investigators found his remains, something about the way they were scattered chilled them to the bone. His leg bones and ribs had been found together in one spot. The pelvis and other fragments? Off to the side. No wild animal does that. A predator would have scattered the bones randomly, dragged them off in different directions, left behind claw marks or evidence of feeding. But this looked arranged. Diane Bonneau, the third known victim, had vanished in 2012 while hiking solo through the Olympic Mountains. She had been an experienced backpacker, someone familiar with the dangers of the wild. Yet, she had disappeared without a trace. Until now. 3 different people, 3 different years, all leading to the same isolated place. Then investigators stumbled upon something else, something that changed everything. Buried deep within Jacob's phone data was a short video, just a few seconds of footage. But what it showed made the officers stop cold. It wasn't a blurry, shaky recording of the forest. It wasn't a meaningless clip of the sky or trees. It was a creature, covered in black fur, standing upright, watching Jacob's tent. Jacob hadn't filmed it directly. He had been watching it from a distance, recording through a telescope lens. That meant whatever this thing was, he had spotted it first, and he had kept his distance. The realization sent a chill through the search team. Had Jacob known he was being watched? Had he tried to document what he saw, leaving behind a final clue before he vanished? When Tanya Barba, a leading Bigfoot researcher, saw the footage, she made a bold claim. She believed Jacob, and possibly the others, had been hunted, killed, eaten, by something that shouldn't exist. Tanya wasn't just some online conspiracy theorist. She was part of one of the most well-known Bigfoot research organizations in the world, a group that had been investigating disappearances in remote forests since 2008. Their team had studied hundreds of cases, people vanishing without a trace in national parks, sometimes leaving behind eerie signs that defied explanation. To her, Jacob's case wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern. She took her findings to the police, presenting them with her theory. But even with this new lead, this chilling, unexplainable evidence, Authorities could not determine exactly what had happened to Jacob, Maxim, or Diane. The forest had swallowed them whole, and whatever had done, it was still out there. Unanswered 911 call. As investigators dug deeper into Jacob's phone, they found yet another disturbing clue. A call he had tried to make to 911 on the night of April 5th. Unfortunately, the call never went through, no doubt due to the terrible reception in the area. But the timing was key. It was clear that Jacob had been in desperate need of help. His last attempt to reach out, to alert someone to whatever was out there in the wilderness with him, had failed. In the days following, Jacob's mother, Laura, sought help from a psychic named May Island, who had been known for assisting families of missing persons, had a chilling vision of what had happened to her son. According to May, Jacob hadn't just been lost in the woods, he had been running for his life. Desperate to escape whatever was chasing him, he had abandoned all his gear in a frantic rush. Tragically, May claimed that Jacob was caught and brought back to the same place from which he had tried to flee. But what had chased him? According to May, it wasn't human. In fact, she suggested that it might have been the very creature Jacob had filmed in that strange video, a creature far beyond the ordinary. The connections between May's vision and Tanya's Bigfoot theory seemed more and more plausible, but the case still raised a lot of questions. If Jacob had been killed by Bigfoot, then why had his trailer and bike been found 11 miles away from where his remains were discovered? And why were there stakes driven into the ground near both the trailer and the spot where his bones were scattered? What had Jacob been trying to do? What really happened to Jacob? Looking closer at Jacob's path, it became clear that something had gone terribly wrong. Based on his route, he had been traveling southeast from the Stalked Trail towards the nearby Woe campground. Our guess is that on the night of April 4th, Jacob had ridden his bike while pulling his trailer, reaching the Stalked Trail before something changed in his journey. At a certain point, his bike and trailer couldn't go any further. He had to leave them behind. He had packed only the essentials: a water filter, a backpack with his tent, his bow, and arrows. With great care, he hid the bike and trailer in the tall grass, leaving a waterproof tarp behind and marking the spot with a stick, as if he was signaling for people not to disturb his things. He had filmed a video showing that he had set up camp in a secluded area, seemingly secure for the night. But then, something terrifying happened. On the night of April 5th, Jacob heard strange noises outside his tent. Filled with fear, he ran out into the night, hoping to escape whatever was stalking him. The next morning, on April 6th, Jacob filmed something that would haunt investigators. The video showed a giant creature, towering and covered in black fur, Bigfoot. It appeared to be harassing Jacob, but what didn't make sense was why he didn't just run away immediately. How could such a large creature have caught up to him? From the footage, it was clear just how massive this thing was. A normal tent stands around 3 feet tall, but this creature loomed far above it, easily 8 feet tall. Bigfoot is known for being incredibly sensitive to scents and often attacks when campers let their guard down. But unlike other animals, Bigfoot doesn't wait for you to spot it. It spots you first. Even if Jacob had a weapon, his bow and arrows or a firearm, they wouldn't have been enough to protect him. And if he tried to run, there was no chance. Bigfoot, with its enormous size and incredible speed, would have tracked him down without hesitation. Jacob's parents never really believed that Bigfoot was behind their son's death. They thought it was something more natural, like maybe a bear attack or a rock slide. Jacob's mom, Laura, shared that his parents' divorce had a big impact on him. He started to show signs of depression, and even though his dad, Randy, was worried, he sent Jacob to community college. But Jacob dropped out soon after, choosing to work at a rock climbing gym instead. He spent his free time riding his bike and exploring the mountains. Jacob saw himself as an adventurer, ready for a big journey across the country. His first stop was supposed to be Olympic Mountain, and he planned to visit his brother in Florida afterward. From the things Jacob packed, it was clear he was preparing for a long trip. But things took a tragic turn when Jacob went missing. Afterward, Randy found a finger bone at the site where Jacob was last seen. Instead of giving it to the police, Randy buried it on the mountain where Jacob had died. He made a small cross out of ropes and wood to honor his son. Sadly, Jacob wasn't the only one connected to the mountain in this way. 2 other people, also tied to Jacob's story, are buried there as well. Despite all this, the mystery of what really happened to Jacob on Olympic Mountain is still unsolved. As time goes by, new information may come out, possibly offering some answers or raising even more questions. For now, Jacob's story remains a mystery, with no clear answers, leaving his family in the dark about what truly happened to him.